It's August 20th, 2020. Thanks for watching the Calvary Briefing today. And on this day, I wanted to remind you, as usual, that it is your last opportunity to phone in your reservation for our worship celebration this weekend. And we are excited during the summer months as we are moving through the book of Genesis. And as we hit a very significant chapter this week, Primo Rodriguez will be bringing us a message from the Word of God. We are blessed at Calvary to have a number of different teachers who can bring us the Word of God and tell us what it means for their lives. So whether you have kids or not, please phone in your reservation. If you've got kids that would like to be a part of our program during the worship celebration, if they're ages 2 to 12, we'd love to have them. We need to know that they're coming. So give us a call today and let us know if you're coming to the worship celebration this weekend. I don't know about you, but I sometimes wrestle in my mind about how I should be acting and behaving during these times. I look at some of what's happening in our world, and I am brokenhearted by some of the things that I see around me, some of the things that I see on television, that I see on the internet. And then I see injustice, and I see things that I believe are wrong, and I want to be bold in standing up for those things. And in trying to wrestle with that as a believer and a follower of Jesus, I haven't always known how to act, how to behave, how to even think. And I found what I think is a really good answer to that dilemma in an article that I read, written by a guy named Justin Taylor. That name may not mean anything to you, but Justin Taylor is the main editor at an organization called Crossway Books, and it's one of the biggest Christian book companies in the world today. They publish all kinds of books, and you've probably read all kinds of books that have been published by Crossway. And one of the reasons that I came to this article by Justin Taylor is that I was at a conference a couple years ago, and we were walking in a hallway, and I went up and introduced myself, and we had a wonderful 10, 15-minute conversation, and he is just a fantastic man of God, and God has used him. He has written recently an article called BROKEN-HEARTED BOLDNESS, and he quotes John Stott at the beginning of his article and says, "Our love grows soft if it is not strengthened by truth, and our truth goes hard if it is not softened by love." And so Justin Taylor advocates that every follower of Jesus really needs to have a permanent attitude of broken-hearted boldness. And as we think about broken-hearted boldness, we might think about the fact that we need to act appropriately in different situations. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us that for everything there is a season. And so sometimes as a follower of Jesus, I have looked at my life and I've said, well, at this time I need to be bold. At this time I need to be broken-hearted. And what Justin Taylor advocates is a Christian alternative, which is this: followers of Jesus live in a permanent state of broken-hearted boldness. Well, what does that even look like? As we look at Paul, it's easy to see his boldness. In fact, sometimes that's what we really think about when we think about Paul, his boldness. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power, Ephesians 6. The Spirit that God gave us did not make us timid, but it gives us power, 2 Timothy 1. My dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, nothing move you, 1 Corinthians 15. Do not be frightened in any way by those who oppose you, Philippians 1. This is muscular Christianity. This is bold Christianity. And Paul was definitely a very bold man for Christ. But something that we don't often recognize in Paul are his tears, his brokenheartedness. In 1 Corinthians 16, he says, "Stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." But then he says, "Let all that you do be done in love." Again, John Stott. The truth is that there are such things as Christian tears, and too few of us ever weep them. Well, as we look at Paul, and as we think about how to live in this world, whether to go to a protest or whether to get down on our knees and weep, whether to write a letter to an editor or to a blog, or whether to send an email to a friend who is really struggling with sorrow, think about this example in Paul's life. As he wrote to the Thessalonians, he says this in chapter 2. "We had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of such conflict." Now, there's the boldness of Paul. There's conflict around Thessalonica, and yet Paul says, remember, we boldly declared the gospel. When it wasn't popular, when it wasn't convenient, we declared the gospel. But 2 verses later, 1 Corinthians 2:4, Paul adds this note, "We were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children." Paul was bold enough to call out enemies of Christ. He was tender enough for that to pain him to the core. And so, as we go through this tough time in history, could God be leading us to be people who live in a permanent state of broken-hearted boldness? Well, I think the life of Paul shows us that it's possible and preferable, and I hope that at least you will consider this possibility in your own life. It's a rare quality, but I believe God is calling us to this kind of a life. I don't know if this is a great example of it, but I came to a story recently from Andy Stanley, and I thought of broken-hearted boldness as I read this story. Stanley writes this, "Sometimes I just want to stop. I want to stop the talk of COVID, looting, brutality. I often lose my way. I become convinced that this is the new normal in real life. But recently I met an 87-year-old who talks of living through polio, diphtheria, Vietnam protests, and yet is still enchanted with life. He seemed surprised when I said to him, 2020 must be especially challenging for you. No, he said, slowly looking me straight in the eyes. I learned a long time ago not to see the world through the printed headlines. I see the world through the people that surround me. I see the world with the realization that we love big. Therefore, I just choose to write my own headlines. Husband loves wife today. Family drops everything to go to grandma's bedside. He patted my hand and said, old man makes new friend. His words collide with my worries, freeing them from the tether I'd been holding them tight. They float away. I'm left with a renewed spirit and a new way to write my own headlines. That's broken-hearted boldness, I think. I hope you think about it this week. Have a great week.